following announcement has been paid for by the new Howell order.
Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, covered all here. Commanders Nightly News. I'm the host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So there's a report floating around that I don't think any of us are surprised by. Still is worth mentioning. There's a report circulating, and this has been confirmed essentially by John Keim and Logan Paulson both, that the players aren't happy with Eric Bieniemy. And there was another report that was circulating that essentially said the players wanted Bieniemy to have less control, right? And this goes all the way back to the preseason and training camp when someone went to Rivera and told him that EB's camp was a little bit too rough. The fact that we even said EB was being too rough and he's not even the head coach shows you just how minimal an impact Rivera had at the time. He kind of just let EB come in and take over, essentially. But Ron should have never said anything about that to the media. That shouldn't have gotten out of the building. That's family business, and that should have stayed family business, and no one should have known about that. It's kind of how I feel about this report here, that the players aren't necessarily in love with Eric Bieniemy, and if they were asked, they wouldn't endorse him as the next head coach of this team. Again, one, that's disrespectful to Ronald Rivera. He's still the head coach here. Two, not that anybody cares at this point, but two, again, like, why kick a man when he's down? He's struggling right now, is Eric Bieniemy. You know, he's struggling. This team isn't performing at the level that they're supposed to be offensively. He's not being looked upon as a head coaching candidate during this cycle anyway. He'd be lucky to get another OC job, to be honest with you, at this point. Maybe someone feels really good about what they've seen from Sam Howell and his growth and development this year and said, hey, we'd love to see you have an opportunity to do the same with our quarterback. I've already, heard from fans of other teams who don't love their offensive scheme that say, hey, we'd love to have Eric Bieniemy. And I'm like, you can have him. He's all yours. Here you go. But again, that felt like something that needed to stay in-house, right? We didn't need that information out to the masses. I don't want to sabotage anyone's opportunities elsewhere. It may not be the spot for him here, but it speaks to a larger point, what we've talked about with Eric Bieniemy. And again, when we were defending him, when we thought he was going to be the savior for this football team, when we were hoping that he could be the next head coach, right, and push Ron aside, we were defending him about how hard he was on his players. These players need discipline. They need structure. They need someone riding them. They haven't been putting in enough work. These players today, in today's day and age, too soft. Yada, yada, yada. And, I talked about this like an episode or two ago about Eric Bieniemy's, the persona that he has, right? And his demeanor and how he goes about his business and how that wears on you over time. And someone had mentioned Jim Harbaugh, John's brother, who's currently at Michigan. But with all the turmoil that has transpired this year, if he doesn't win a national championship, he could be gone, right? Or he could just choose to jump ship. He was interested in the NFL last year, right? He took an interview last year, didn't like what he heard, and stayed at Michigan. So anything's possible. I'm not interested in Jim Harbaugh, and I listed the reasons why. And a lot of the reasons that exist for Jim Harbaugh, I think you could take those same reasons and you could extrapolate them to Eric Bieniemy, right? And extend them to EB as to why I don't think he would be a successful coach. I think his style, similar to Jim Harbaugh's, is better suited for the collegiate game. And I'm not surprised that the players don't love EB's style. I'm not surprised that it hasn't, gone over the way that we hoped it would, because as a fan, I haven't loved what EB has done. And again, I'm not there every day. I'm not dealing with the yelling and all of the things that goes on at practice. But if you've played football, if you played for any sport, it doesn't have to be football. If you just played for a demanding coach at any level, then that's just the cost of doing business. So I'm not too concerned about him yelling and berating players potentially, even though that shit sucks. If you can coach without doing that, that's great. But if that's your style, that's your style, right? At the end of the day, it's about results, and that's what this all boils. If we were 8-4 right now, instead of 4-8, there would be no one complaining about EB's style, and there would be no reports about him not being endorsed by the players, right? All of this stems from losing, okay? And when you're losing and you're not happy, then everything is available to be complained about, essentially. Nobody's safe. So I'm not surprised by this at all. I'm surprised at just how much power he had within the organization, within the day-to-day structure of how things went. It was one thing to let him have control of camp, you know, and let him come in there and run it the way, because he was installing his system and he wanted to install certain core values in the players, how to strain and, you know, get to the finish line and collectively drag your ass across. Like these were things he was trying to instill in the players. And it was supposed to come to fruition during the season. In those tough, gritty games where we just needed a little bit extra motivation, you could turn back to those days in camp when you were being pushed past your limits potentially by Eric Bieniemy, and it just never came to fruition, right? And so I'm shocked that he's still being given not necessarily autonomy, but so much control over how things go. And I think the players are saying, hey, we don't like him having this much power. And again, what are we talking about? This is the big issue here. The big story is, even if he were in consideration, the players are like, nah, we good. And I think that's telling. I think that speaks to where he is in his development as a coach. I said yesterday, or even I think it was Saturday, when I got on live with you guys, when I was talking about Jack Del Rio and Brent Wieselmeyer being let go. I said that the only firing that would have moved the needle slightly for me, not a ton, but slightly for me, because the Jack Del Rio firing and the Brent Wieselmeyer fire, they don't move the needle for me at all. But the only one that would have slightly moved it was Ronald being fired. Why? Because it was going to give someone, and it wasn't going to be Jack, because we already know what Jack is, and Ronald didn't assign him assistant head coach for a reason. He assigned that to Eric Bieniemy. And it would have given EB an opportunity to show, was he a leader of men or not? I think this statement that's been put out, and this report from John Keim and you know, also verified by Logan Paulson, who are around these players who have the pulse of the team, I think it speaks to him not being a leader of men, him not being able to galvanize this particular group. And I'm not saying he can't do it elsewhere, but this particular group here, it wasn't going to work. And again, it speaks to a larger point of Eric Bieniemy, why he hasn't potentially gotten any jobs yet, right? He doesn't captivate a crowd, and he doesn't motivate anyone to want to give him an opportunity, if that makes sense. And that's what it boils down to. When you go into these interview rooms with these teams that are looking to hire a head coach, you got to sell them on why you're the right man for the job. And clearly he hasn't been good enough at doing that. And he hasn't done that here either. So there's that. Like I said, at the end of the day, no one's safe when this thing's all said and done. Once that 18th game is in the books and this regular season is done, all of these guys are gone. Guys and gals are gone. So this report just kind of confirms what we already knew, which is EB just isn't the right man for the job. In other news, today should be a relatively quick show. I don't want to keep you here super long. We'll have a larger discussion tomorrow when we go live for CNN Live, and I've got a spirited conversation to have with you guys, one that we've talked about previously. It's been brought to the forefront with a recent article that was written, and we'll go through some of those things that were said and kind of talk about it. But, this is something that we already discussed, and it's just, again, it's always nice to have confirmation, right, of how you're feeling. That's all that article has done for me. But we'll discuss that tomorrow when we get there. Let's talk about this now, right? I want to talk about Sam Howell, because yesterday I talked about The Killer, a movie on Netflix about a hitman, contract killer who goes by certain principles that helps him focus on the task at hand, right? Forbid empathy, trust no one, and do the job, only the job that you were paid to do. One of the things that has come up over the last week since Washington has plummeted from a fringe playoff team to now one of the worst in football is they're getting closer to the top of the draft. They're not going to get to 1, 2, and probably less likely 3. They're not going to get to any of those numbers, right? 4 is as high as they can get because Arizona, New England, and Carolina aren't winning very many more games, if any more games this season. And they're at 2, and Carolina's at 1. So the likelihood that any of those teams makes it to 4, slim and none, right? Especially without Washington winning another game. And as I mentioned already, Aaron Rodgers probably not going to play in that week, 16 game. Why would he? The Jets are going to stink. And he came on finally. He started talking with some sense on Pat McAfee's show today, where he pretty much said, hey, how I feel and where the Jets are going to, largely determine what decision I make. Clearly, your health is going to determine that, but he would have pushed the envelope had the Jets been, a game or two out of the playoff race. They're not going to be even close. They're going to be closer to the top of the draft than they are the playoffs. By the time he's, healthy enough right around Christmas Eve, which is when we play them, to come back. They didn't make any sense, and I've been saying that. I don't think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers because the Jets aren't going to be any good. That said, I've been seeing some things, and I sort of disagree with it. I get the concept, but I vehemently disagree, and here's why. So I've been seeing this a lot. The closer Washington gets to the top of the draft, the harder it becomes to resist the urge to take a quarterback. And for those who don't believe in Sam, that rings true for you. You know where I am, right?
New.
However, I think that's a faulty statement. I liken it to, first of all, a wise man once told me, I got discipline, okay? I got discipline. And if you got discipline, then you don't have to worry about factors that are around you. Case in point, you're a married man, you're happily married, you love your significant other. Say you're a heterosexual man, and you just happen to go somewhere with your boys, and it doesn't even have to be a strip club. It could just be somewhere. For instance, me and my boys, we went to South Beach, scattered ass everywhere. If you don't have discipline, then maybe that scattered ass could tempt you to do something that you shouldn't do, right? Temptation might be great. But if you know who you are, you're resolute in what you believe in, your foundation, your rock is your significant other, and you would never jeopardize that, it could be as much scattered ass around you as possible. You're not fazed. You might be looking, but you're not tempted to touch. Because a wise man once said, I got discipline, baby, and I use it a lot. And so when I look at Washington and I see where they are in the draft, and they end up with the, let's say, 4th pick, and I don't think we're going to end up that high, honestly. I think we're going to end up with like the 6th or the 7th pick when it's all said and done. Because I think we're going to beat the Jets, and we could beat the Rams. And maybe we don't beat the Rams. I think the Rams are playing better football. We'll see where they are. If Stafford's healthy, I don't like us in that game because I don't like our defense. But the Jets don't have an offense, and I know the Giants didn't have an offense, and they still were able to score. And the Jets' defense is really good. We could lose that game. It's on the road too, but we play better on the road, right? So who knows? We'll see. At the end of the day, we only got 3 real opportunities to win left on the schedule. Rams off the bye, Jets in the Week 16 game, Cowboys in Week 18 if they don't need it. Those are 3 You're not beating the Dolphins, and you're not beating the 49ers, okay? So, of those 3 games, you're probably not going to win all 3 of them. My guess is you'll win 1, possibly 2 of them. But as I've mentioned, and we've looked at the list, and we'll do it again next week after another week has passed as we head into our bye, you'll see that those teams that are behind us, they're going to win some more games. You know? The only team, and I said this to you guys yesterday, Jets, don't know if they're going to win any more games. But they play us. They might beat us. We'll see. Anyway, the conversation is, has led to, hey, the closer you get towards the top, the harder it is to risk this to quarterback. And I'm like, nah, not exactly, not for me. Because I know what I know. And I know what I want, and I know what I'm looking for, and I know what I believe. And it'd be one thing, because to me, the only guy that I would truly be okay with them moving on from Sam for is Caleb Williams. And I don't want him because I don't think mentally he is tough enough for the position of quarterback at this level. Like, and I could be all wrong and I could be off base with that, but he's shown me signs at the collegiate level that the pressure is mounting and it's become too great for him. And if you can't deal with it while you're in college, it's only going to get worse when it becomes amplified when you're the number 1 overall pick in the NFL. Your expectations go through the roof. And if you can't handle that, we got issues, my friend. And he's already struggling with that at USC. So I don't know if I really want to deal with that. You know, I need my quarterback to be able to stand up, face the media, face the music after a rough game, after you lose, you don't play well, whatever the case may be. I need you to stand up and own that. Anyway, he'd be the only guy that I'd be okay with them moving on from Sam for, honestly. All the rest of these dudes, I think Sam's better than them. I think he's better than Drake May. I think he's better than Michael Penix Jr. I think he's better than, Jalen, whatever his name is from LSU. And fill in all the blanks. Take whatever quarterback you like. None of those guys are better than Sam, if you ask me. Period. So, I'm not tempted. I would literally be going in and I'm looking to do the job that I was paid to do, which is to go get protection for Sam. But I want to further this conversation. So the way I'm going to do that is we're going to take a look at some numbers. And numbers aren't always my favorite thing to do, right? Because numbers are, you know how that goes. You can make numbers say what you want them to say. And, some people get too hung up on numbers. But I like numbers that are impactful. And I like comparing numbers to other players that I respect. And you guys have heard me say this before. Many a times probably over the life of, my career here. I started doing this in 2012. I started the LouieTeeNetwork in 2012. And the first draft that I covered was the 2012 draft. Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin III, Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson, Brandon Weeden. I had a series called The Starting Five where I literally followed their trajectory that entire year, and because they were all starting. Day one, they were all starting week 1. Brandon Weeden for the Browns, Russell Wilson for the Seahawks, Ryan Tannehill for the Dolphins, Robert Griffin III for the Washington Redskins, and, of course, Andrew Luck for the Indianapolis Colts. I've said this numerous times. Joe Burrow is the best quarterback I've evaluated since I've started. And it's neck and neck with him and Andrew Luck, but I put him above Andrew Luck slightly, right? Burrow had it all, had the ridiculous season, played a gauntlet schedule at LSU in the SEC, and put up monster numbers, won the national championship. He could move, he could throw on the move, he could throw from the pocket, he could give it to you any way you wanted it. And I said, he's slightly better than Andrew Luck. There was a big gap between those top two and then Trevor Lawrence, but I thought Lawrence was the third best prospect I had evaluated at the quarterback position. So essentially, I'm comparing Sam Howell's first 13 starts in the NFL to the three guys that I feel like have been the best three quarterbacks to come out in the NFL in the last decade plus. Okay? So Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. Right, first 13 starts of their careers. Now, what's interesting is you start at the very top and you see that Andrew Luck had more passing attempts in his first 13 starts than that of Sam Howell, which I thought was impossible. We all thought that Sam's arm is going to fall off. He's throwing the ball so much, right? There's no way anybody's attempted more passes in their first 13 starts than this guy. That's how we think. But Andrew Luck had attempted more passes than Sam Howell in his first 13 starts, which is amazing to me. So he's still second in that category, attempts. Yards, as you can see, he's second behind Andrew Luck. Makes sense. Luck threw it more times. And he's way ahead of Trevor Lawrence at that point. And ahead of Joe by a couple hundred yards, or less than 200 yards, slightly less, about 180 yards. Completion percentage, this is significant. Like, he's 1/10 of a percentage point behind Joe Burrow, right? Or is that 100th? 100th of a point. I think it's 100th. Don't get me the line. We talking about percentages here. He is right there is essentially what I'm saying. 66.2 for Joe Burrow, 66.1 for Sam Howell. So, and that's huge, man. Completion percentage is huge because in the NFL, when you get an opportunity, you got to hit guys. And Sam's shown the ability to consistently do that. He's had some misses this year that in some passes he'd love to have back. But he's also, we already in 13 games, we've got a complete highlight tape for Sam Howell of dimes he's dropped. Throws where you just go, wow. Right? We've already got a complete tape of that. We had that through 10 weeks of football. I think at the completion of the Seahawks game, we had a whole vignette that we could put together of dimes from Sam Howell, right? So yards per attempt, as you can see, tied for second with Burrow behind Luck's 7.1. And you see Andrew Luck's completion percentage, if we just go back for a second, it's in the dumps, 55% essentially. And Trevor Lawrence is 58%. So, I mean, they're not even in the ballpark, right? With Howell and Burrow. Touchdowns, he's second behind Burrow's 20. Luck, 18. So he's right in that neighborhood with the best of the best, from a touchdown perspective. Interceptions, you're going to turn it over. And this number, Joe Burrow is the only one that didn't really turn it over. And that's why he's the best, right? But if you look at the other guys, Lawrence had a 9-14 touchdown interception ratio. So he was below 1-1, right? He was heading towards 1-2, which is, you don't want the second number to be higher than the first, right? You want that first number to be as high as possible, and you want that back number to be 1. He's heading towards 1-2 touchdown to interception. So he's got it upside down, and Luck's literally at 1-1. For every touchdown, there's an interception at 18/18. So what I'm essentially trying to convey to you, you're going to turn it over, man. When you're a rookie, when you're young, you're going to turn the football over. That's the nature of the beast. It's the cost of doing business. You got to learn. You're going to make mistakes. Balls are going to get tipped in the air. Shit's going to happen. Okay? Touchdown percentage, 3.8 for him. That's second behind Joe Burrow's 4.2. You see Lawrence at 1.9. He's not even close, right? Interception percentage, 2.8 for Sam. That puts him third in this category, so second best behind Joe Burrow's 1.9%. So the percentage of interceptions thrown compared to attempts. Again, he's second best on this list behind Joe Burrow. All right. Rating. He's got the second best rating, again, behind Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow's rating, it would, after 13 games, starts rather, 92.3 for Sam, 87.1, right? 74.5 for Luck, and 69 essentially for Trevor Lawrence. Sacks taken, that's a big number, right? 58 sacks for Sam. You don't want to see it. You hate it, but it's a part of what has been created with the offensive line and some of the scheme that EB's put forth. And some of it's on Sam, too. We talked about this, ad nauseum. And so you can see that number is way higher than anybody else's. That's a number that definitely, and it's come down of late, obviously. They're still on pace, though, to set the record. If they don't have a game or two in here where they, are able to protect him a little bit better. I don't think we're going to set the record, personally. I think you're going to have one or two games in here where he gets sacked once or twice, and you're not going to approach that record. But you're 1 6-7 sack game away from us being smack dab in the middle of setting that record. Anyway, the next closest guy is 16 sacks less. So we're talking about you're on the interstate and there's not another exit ramp for 15, 16 miles. You're going to be driving forever. Hope you don't have to use the bathroom. Or we're going to have to pull over. Like, it's significant. Sack yards, obviously, they're significant. But even Joe Burrow, I talked about guys that are playmakers, how they want to extend. Joe Burrow is one of those players. I talk about that. Mahomes is another one of those guys. You're going to have a ton of sack yardage when you're players that think you can extend and make something happen because you're running backwards. Look at Joe Burrow. 16 less sacks, but he's already in the 300s in terms of sack yards. That means he's running backwards, extend. That was the biggest knock on Joe Burrow coming out of LSU, is he doesn't know when to say when, right? That probably is part of the reason why he had 42 sacks. The offensive line wasn't good. That's why he tore his ACL in his rookie season. But still, that's Joe Burrow. That's part of his DNA, and that's part of Sam as well, right? Sack percentage, obviously Sam's is through the roof. 10.3. Again, we need that to come down drastically, and I think with a more efficient offensive play calling or philosophical approach, and more experience from Sam, knowing what he's seeing, knowing pre-snap reads, tells from the defense what's coming, and then also just having a better offensive line. Some of these sacks weren't even about blitzing or anything. It's just the offensive line that just isn't very good. So I expect it to come down. Rushing is nice. You see Sam is dead last in attempts, yet has the most yards rushing of all the quarterbacks. So obviously his yards per attempt are the highest of anybody in the group. So again, shows you some of the athleticism. Andrew Luck was a freak athlete coming out of Indy, out of Stanford rather. Lawrence was a really solid athlete, and Sam's still got better rush yards than them, better rush totals than them. He's got the second most rush touchdowns behind Andrew Luck's 5. He's got 4. Fumbles, again, Andrew Luck fumbled 10 times in his first 13 starts. You combine that with the 18 interceptions, that's 28 total turnovers for Andrew Luck. Our guy has only fumbled 4 times, right? Now, Andrew Luck fumbled 10 but only lost 5. Our guy lost 2 in his 4. So of all the quarterbacks, he's fumbled the least amount of times and he's lost the least amount of fumbles. Okay. So when you combine the 2 lost fumbles with the 14 interceptions, 16 total turnovers, again, you look at the rest of these guys, and we'll get to that down at the bottom. I'll just save that for when we get there. So you look at total yards, pass yards, 3,500 for Sam. That's second best behind Andrew Luck's 3,792. So he's about 200 yards, almost 300 yards roughly behind Andrew Luck. But essentially 200 yards above Joe Burrow. We've done this already. Rush yards, we've already talked about that. Sack yards, we've already talked about that. Total net yards, okay? So when you subtract, you add the pass yards, the rush yards, and then you subtract the sack yards. Even with that done, even with Sam being out in front of the pack with the sack yards, he's still second highest total net yards, right? Behind Andrew Luck. So you get to scoring. You know, we talked about the touchdowns already. We know what the numbers are. Sam's second behind Joe Burrow's 20 with 19. Luck's right there with 18, and Lawrence is dragging behind the group with just 9, right? Rush TDs, we talked about this. He's got 4. This Sam through 13 games. Luck had 5, so he's right there. Total touchdowns, we talked about the total turnovers, but total touchdowns, Sam, Andrew Luck, and Joe Burrow all accounted for 23 total touchdowns through 13 games. So he's right on pace with the best of the best that we've seen at the quarterback position coming out of the draft in the last decade plus. Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence, not even close, right? Doesn't mean Trevor Lawrence sucks. You see what he's doing right now. He's playing really well. Got the Jaguars at 8-3 on the season, right? Just struggled in his first 13 games, which is why you just got to give guys time. You know, this rush to judgment, I just don't understand it. Even when the numbers are smacking you in the face telling you that this kid's playing well. And you've watched it. You've seen the eyeball test. You watched the end of the first Eagles game and he took us down the field. You watched the Seattle Seahawks game when he took us down the field and gave us a chance. You're watching him do this. You watched him in the Giants game. Take us down the field. Was it a great pass? No. Should Jahan Dotson have caught it? Yes. Should have it resulted in a first down? Yes. We should have been able to tie that game, maybe go for 2 and win. Whatever. We probably would have kicked the extra point. Doesn't matter. You've seen him in these instances and you've seen him perform. When his best was required, you've seen him give you his best.
New Howell order.
Yet some people still don't want to acknowledge what we've watched. We talked about the interceptions. We talked about the fumbles. We talked about the fumbles lost. So when you combine interceptions and fumbles, 18 for Sam. Not fumbles lost, just fumbles in general. You got 14 interceptions, 4 fumbles. And you look at the rest of these guys. Everybody else except for Joe Burrow, who he's tied with, everybody else is in the 20s. Andrew Luck is heading to the 30s, okay? Right? When you combine interceptions and fumbles lost, so this is actual turnovers. The first stat wasn't actual turnovers. It's just you producing an opportunity for the opposition to get their hands on the football, the interceptions and the fumbles. These are actually turnovers, losing possession of the football. 16 for Sam, all right? 13 for Joe Burrow. He's second behind Burrow in that category. All right. His 3% in terms of interceptions and fumbles divided by attempts, including sacks, is 3%, which is the best of any of those quarterbacks. He's not turning the ball over at an alarming rate. For the amount of attempts, dropbacks that he's had, yes, 14 interceptions suck. But if you really look at that, and it's, I hate doing this. It's akin to, hey, we gave up 223 rush yards, but if you take out those 2 big runs, the 72-yarder and the 55-yarder, hey, it really ain't that bad of a day. But you can't do that. That's a part of why you gave up 223 yards rushing or whatever the number is, right? But if you take away the Buffalo game, and the second Giants game, I mean, what are we talking about here? He's in C.J. Stroud's, territory at that point. But you can't take those games away. And they're a part of his growth and maturation. He needs those types of performances to help him grow, right? Now, a big one here, win-loss, right? Because that's what everybody cares about. What's your record in the league? Andrew Luck was the only one to have a winning record through 13 games. And this is more about the team around you and less about the actual individual. Like, for Luck in particular, he was that dude. And the Colts weren't that bad. Remember, the only reason they were even in a position to draft him is because Peyton Manning had neck surgery 2 off seasons prior and couldn't play the previous year, and they sucked because they had Curtis Painter and a bunch of bums, and they weren't able to win any games really, and that put them in a position. But the year prior to that, they were a playoff team, probably in the divisional or championship round, right, with Peyton Manning. So that wasn't a bad football team They just needed somebody to come in there and get them back on track. And so Luck did exactly that. So they're 9-4 through 13 games with Andrew Luck under center. Meanwhile, Trevor Lawrence 2-11. That's Urban Meyer, so you got to take it with a grain of salt, right? And Joe Burrow was 4-9. Same coach that he has right now, 4-9. Trash offensive line. Didn't have Jamar Chase yet. Tough situation to be in, right? And our guy's 5-8. So second best record after 13 games amongst these other three quarterbacks. Average age over first 13 starts. Everybody's kind of same area, right? You don't want a super old guy, right? Sam's pretty much 23 years old. Luck's 23. Lawrence turned 22, and Burrow's turned 24, essentially. So again, right in that same range where you're supposed to be. And then just a little bit of a sidebar right here at the bottom, right? Easy to ignore this, but you shouldn't, because this factors into some of the decision making and some of the shit that you're doing and some of the things you see from Sam on the field, particularly that second Giants game, I believe, right? Ranked yards per game, team defense. Ranked points per game, team defense. And ranked turnovers per game, team defense, right? So Washington's yards per game given up by their defense is 29th. It's the worst of any of the four quarterbacks that we're looking at that had to deal with in their rookie seasons, essentially in their first 13 starts. Luck's was close. They gave up 20. They were 28th in the league that year. But Sam's defense being 29th in the league in yards per game is the worst of any of the defenses that these quarterbacks had to play with. Points per game is the most important one. Some of this is, points per game is a little bit of an iffy stat because obviously you got other things that factor in. If your quarterback throws a pick six, Sam has thrown, a couple of pick sixes each of the last 2 weeks, and he had the fumble, scoop, and score against Arizona earlier this season. So those things contribute to points per game, but the defense is trash. Like, I'm not looking to make any excuses for them. We got dead last points per game. We're giving up the most points per game in the NFL right now. So that's what Sam has. So allow that to enter your brain and think about what that actually represents. Now you got a young quarterback feeling like he's back at college. And I felt like that's what happened in the Giants game, the second Giants game. That pick he threw trying to get it to Jahan Dotson with two guys bearing down on him, rolling out to his right when he shouldn't have thrown it. That was, to me, hero ball at its finest, where he's having a flashback of being at UNC again and feeling like, hey, I got to make a play because ain't nobody else making it. And the defense is getting scorched. I got to do something. You make a bad play worse, right? That's what happens when you got the 32nd ranked scoring defense in football. Dead last. And so obviously nobody else has anything worse than that. I mean, hell, the Bengals had the 17th scoring defense that year. Like, they're almost top half of the league. Nobody's even close except for Lawrence's Jaguars defense, which was 28th in the league. And then turnovers per game. None of these teams defensively created turnovers. As a matter of fact, Lawrence's defense was dead last that year. Burrow's wasn't that bad. They were 20th. They weren't super bad, but both Andrew Luck's and Sam Howell's defenses weren't creating turnovers. So that what that indicates is they weren't creating short fields for the young quarterbacks, right? They weren't helping those young quarterbacks along to score points, to bolster the scoring average, to feel comfortable, to not have to drive the length of the field. Essentially what that is saying is, hey, they had to do the shit on their own. Defense wasn't really providing much help with short fields. We've seen that. We know what this defense has provided Sam with this year. I just think these numbers are really interesting. And I'm going to give a shout out to Alexin Simon 85, who had this graphic here, and this is where I got it from on Twitter. I think these are really, really intriguing numbers. And again, I couldn't have compared them to three better quarterbacks because I've told you guys this. These are the best three quarterbacks to come out over the last decade plus, right here. And look where Sam falls in his first 13 games. Comparatively to these three guys. He's right there. Better in most of these categories than all three of them. And, you know, he's better than Burrow here and there. He's better than Luck here and there. He's better than Trevor Lawrence in everything. But he's there. He's where he needs to be is essentially what I'm trying to convey. All I'm trying to say, outside of the fact that I ride for Sam, I'm outside, and you know what it is.
New Howell order.
All I'm trying to say is, I don't give a damn how close you get to the top, because you're not getting to 1, 2, or 3. If you get to 4, I don't care if you get to 4. You shouldn't be enticed to take a quarterback. And that's essentially the point that I'm trying to make. Wise man once told me, I got discipline, baby, and I use it a lot. I know what I got. So I got discipline, baby. And I'm prepared to use it as much as I need to. We need a tackle. And if you land at 4, great, go get you a tackle. Again, only do the job you've been paid to do. The job is clear, it's simple. It isn't to go get a quarterback. It isn't to go get a receiver or a tight end. The job we've been paid to do is to protect the young investment at quarterback. Get you a tackle if you're in a position to do so. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Commanders Nightly News. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys. Next time we'll be live tomorrow night for Commanders Nightly News Live. For those of you who have the stomach for it, we'll be over on the NFC East Super Friends channel tonight, chopping it up with the fellas, talking about this division. It really isn't much to talk about. It's a 2-team race, and the other 2 are fighting over last place. And at this point, I'm like, hey, Giants, I'll take it. I got it, man. You don't got to worry about it. I'll take it from here. I don't mind being in the cellar. Let me have it. So, if you don't want any parts of that, I don't blame you. I'll see you tomorrow night. If you've got a stomach, you're not faint of heart, and you with that smoke, come join me tonight. I'll be over on the NFC East Super Friends channel, chopping it up with the fellas. So, 8 o'clock. See you guys then. In any event, you know what it is. Post up. Take command. See you guys next time. Have a good one.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap. Hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20.